Does the signing of Aroldis Chapman signal a big offseason spending spree for the Boston Red Sox? More on today's Locked On Red Sox.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part of all of it is it's completely free. So you might as well tune in because Locked On is your team every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I will certainly tell you a little bit more about FanDuel later on in today's show, but happy Thursday. Hope you're off to a tremendous start to your day. And the Red Sox the other day made their first quote-unquote big move of the offseason when they agreed to a 1-year, $10.75 million deal with free agent pitcher Aroldis Chapman. Now, does that signing indicate a big spending spree for Boston moving forward in the coming weeks? I'm going to be touching on that on today's show, as well as talking about the pitching philosophy, whether they get Juan Soto or don't, and how that impacts their approach when it comes to the pitching. And finally, we're going to have a discussion on Craig Breslow versus John Henry. I'm going to distinguish for you who makes what types of decisions so that you know who to actually blame in situations where you feel like it was an underwhelming offseason for the Red Sox, if it does end up being that way, or giving credit to the right person if the Red Sox do go out and make these big moves to improve the team. So as we wait for the Red Sox to make more moves, they did agree to this 1-year deal with Aroldis Chapman. He's obviously 36 years old, so he's getting to the point in his career where he's not as effective as he was back in the years of 2017, 2018, when the Red Sox were facing him a lot because he was pitching for the Yankees. So we're not necessarily going to get that version of Chapman. And like I said on yesterday's show, I do worry about consistency with him. He hasn't always proven that he can perform well in the biggest scenarios where there's a lot of pressure on him. So I'm going to be looking to him to change that in 2025 and be a little bit more consistent and be somebody who the Red Sox can rely on in high leverage, because I'm not 100% confident right now that he's a high leverage arm that the Red Sox could utilize. But the fact that they did bring him in and they said that improving the bullpen was a goal of theirs, does that show that the Red Sox are serious about this new offseason approach of really being aggressive and making bigger moves, as opposed to the approach they've taken the last few years of not really committing to big name players as much, but rather making these smaller signings and in the long run, not having players who can contribute? I will say that as much as Aroldis Chapman is towards the end of his career now, and it's only a 1-year deal, they checked off a box, which was acquiring some left-handed pitching help in the bullpen, because the Red Sox don't really have many lefties in the pen right now that they can rely on. So that checked a box off of, okay, we need some left-handed pitching in this pen. So let's bring in a guy who is one of the best in the business in big games and somebody who has had a ton of experience. So they bring in Chapman. Obviously, we don't know what version of him we're going to get, but the idea of them bringing in somebody who has a reputable major league career in terms of what he's done on the baseball field, that to me shows that the Red Sox are serious and they aren't just saying things just to say them. Because last winter, I felt like they were saying things just to say them, like when they would say full throttle and this is our year and we're going to go out and make these big moves so that the fans can believe us again and get back on board with what we're doing, only for them to then go back and not actually do that and kind of play it conservatively when it comes to the moves that they were making. And then it led to this discussion of how trusted is ownership. How much can we actually trust that they are going to do what they say they're going to do? But heading into this offseason, they have said, and by they, I mean John Henry, Sam Kennedy, Craig Breslow, all of these higher ups within the Red Sox organization that help make these decisions. They have all said at one point or another this offseason that they hear the fans, they understand the frustration, and they're going to go out and make some big moves this offseason to be back in the conversations of being a World Series contender. They said their goal in 2025 is to win the division. Great. Now go out and get some players that'll help you win the division. Their goal is to try to go back to the World Series. Okay, great. Get players that can go out and try to get you to the World Series. So they have said multiple times that that is their intention, but obviously actions speak a lot louder than words. And given recent history with the Red Sox front office, it's easy to feel like you're not going to believe anything they say when they say that. But they bring in a guy in Aroldis Chapman who will help improve the bullpen, considering how bad the bullpen was in 2024. So that already, to me, is an impactful move. That's a little bit more than really any move they made last winter. And so to me, I feel like this almost solidifies that offseason approach that the Red Sox are taking of saying we're not afraid to go out and get the guys that we need to get. And from a financial standpoint, too, that they're obviously not afraid to dish out contracts. What I will say, though, is are they ready to commit to these long-term deals? And from everything I'm hearing from people I trust, they are incredibly serious about Soto, and he is the guy that they covet, that they want to get, in which case then that means, yes, we are willing to pay him $600 million. And that's a bigger Red Sox contract than we would have thought we were going to see. So between signing Chapman and the fact that they're so committed to Juan Soto right now makes me feel like the Red Sox offseason approach in terms of the types of guys that they want to sign and the moves that they plan on making is different, and that this offseason truly is the one where they're going to go out and be aggressive and do whatever it takes to set the franchise up for success in the future. Now, if you think about the Red Sox of the last few seasons and how they've just kind of been mediocre and they've lost games that they should have won, and they've had so many struggles with injury and pitchers not performing. Now I feel like they're trying to switch that narrative and say, we're the Boston Red Sox. You are right. We are still a big market team. We do still care about winning, because that was what the message was that was being sent to the fans, was that John Henry does not care about winning. So by going out and making these big moves to improve this Red Sox team, he's showing that he actually does care about winning. And going out and bringing in somebody like Aroldis Chapman, despite the fact that I don't like him as a person and he doesn't have the best reputation when it comes to the off the field stuff, but he is somebody from a baseball standpoint that will help improve the Red Sox bullpen. So in that regard, I feel like the Red Sox finally made a move that we as fans can say should be impactful, making a move for a guy who will be able to come in here and make the baseball team better. And those are the types of moves that matter this offseason. So in terms of their offseason approach, what message does this Chapman signing send about that? That to me solidifies that they meant what they said when they came on record and said, we heard you. We want to be a playoff contending team in 2025. So here's a guy who was a significant upgrade from a lot of the players we had in the bullpen last year. So hopefully they have that same mindset towards every move they make this offseason, and they don't just decide to take their feet off the gas and say, okay, we made an impactful bullpen move, now we're good. I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know with this front office. And coming up, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the pitching philosophy and how they might go about the rest of their offseason based on one big factor. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. If you've never tried sports betting before, utilizing FanDuel is a great way to get into it because you can start off with little bets and work your way up to betting on more that makes you more money. So if you're new to it, highly recommend FanDuel. If you're a veteran, but you've been using other sports betting vendors, switch over to FanDuel today because the payouts, I promise you, are a lot better there. The Boston Red Sox made their first notable move of the offseason on Tuesday when they agreed to a one-year deal with free agent pitcher Aroldis Chapman. Now, from a baseball perspective, he makes the Red Sox a better team, and he will make their bullpen better. So the question then led into, what does this mean for the rest of the offseason for the Red Sox? Does this send a message that they weren't making that up and they were serious about saying, we want to be a contending team in 2025? Now, when you sign somebody like Chapman, it makes you wonder what the rest of the pitching philosophy is going to be for the offseason. Now, it was confirmed yesterday that the Red Sox are heavily looking into the trade market for a starting pitcher, which I have said on the show before. I said, expect the Red Sox to look into potentially trading for that #1 starting pitcher. And it was confirmed yesterday that if the Red Sox do not land Juan Soto, then they would be more likely to sign one of those free agent starters that's still available. But if they do land Soto, the Red Sox are going to try to acquire that ace via trade. And I have said this before because I said I don't see the Red Sox going out and spending a lot of money on a free agent starter if they're giving Juan Soto this massive contract. I just don't see it. I don't think the Red Sox would give out that kind of money to two players. So if they get Soto, just expect them to try to execute a trade for a #1 starting pitcher. Now, the question there becomes, what happens if Soto takes a lot more time to make his decision and then the Red Sox start missing out on guys? So that's why they kind of have to be proactive with it and kind of pick a lane and decide, okay, are we definitely going to commit to a trade versus signing one of those free agent starters who's available, who's an ace? Because whether or not we get Soto, we still need a guy. And I get the impression from what I've heard around the industry is that the Red Sox aren't wild about Corbin Burnes. He's not really somebody who is as much on the Red Sox radar. Max Fried is somebody that they are more interested in. And obviously we know they were interested in Blake Snell. But the question is, how interested are they in Fried compared to their interest in potentially trading for a guy? Because this is good to think about since we don't know for sure which path is better for Boston, but they're going to have to look at some pitchers that could be available for trade and decide if they like the appeal of them more than Max Fried. So that also is going to go into this decision of, oh, hey, we like the stuff that Max Fried brings, but we like Garrett Crochet's stuff better, or Garrett Crochet's younger, so we can get more out of him if we trade for him, as opposed to offering Max Fried this big contract and not really knowing how much more he has in the tank. So there's going to have to be a lot of different things that they think about when it comes to this situation. But with Soto's decision looming, I could see them not really pulling the trigger on anything until they know where Soto's going officially, because nothing's official till you put pen to paper. And Soto could verbally say he's going somewhere, but that doesn't mean that it's official until he puts pen to paper on it. So if he comes to the Red Sox and says, I want to accept your offer for sure, and he signs pen to paper, then okay, it's a done deal. But until then, it's not. And while they wait for Soto to make this decision, they do have to be proactive when it comes to figuring out how they want to handle that pitching situation, because they'll miss out on guys if they don't take action now. So I know that Breslow has already started those conversations about pitchers. He's been talking to the free agent starters, also been making calls to other teams about starting pitchers that could be on the market this offseason. But if they commit to Juan Soto in this big way that they are supposedly committing to him, I don't see them saying, okay, now let's go and offer Corbin Burns or Max Fried a bunch of money too. I just don't think the Red Sox are going to do that based on their behavior the last few seasons and their spending restrictions. I just don't believe that they will spend that kind of money on both. That's why I do think that this trading for a starting pitcher scenario is the most likely option. And if they trade for a starting pitcher, they need to know who is untouchable. And those big four are certainly untouchable, because they have made it clear that those four prospects are guys that they genuinely see being part of the future of the Red Sox organization. So I don't think the Red Sox would even entertain a trade conversation if the names Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell, Marcelo Meyer, or Kyle Teal came up. I just think the Red Sox would shut the door on that immediately and say, okay, we are not going to give you one of those guys, so you better adjust what you want. What I think they would be open to, though, is if a team says, hey, we want Tristan Casas, or we want Wilyer Abreu. Again, I've said so many times that I think it makes sense for the Red Sox to trade Abreu, but Tristan Casas is a controversial one. A lot of people don't want to see him go. But if the Red Sox truly mean what they say, I don't think they see Tristan Casas as untouchable, especially because he was injured for most of the season last year. So it's hard to know for sure what he's going to be this upcoming season and if he's going to be able to bounce back from that or not. I absolutely do think he has the potential to eventually be a 40 home run guy over the course of his career, which is pretty remarkable. And if the Red Sox do trade him, they'll definitely miss out on that. And that would be a bummer as a fan to see him go and do that with somebody else. But at the same time, when you know that pitching is a serious need for this Red Sox team and they can replace Casas at first base and they have a lineup that's strong, especially if Juan Soto's in it, then I don't think they would be afraid to say, okay, we don't really need Casas anymore. So if we're going to trade somebody, we should trade him, because teams would be very attracted to his potential and what he can do at his age, because he's still so young and still has so much left to go in his career, obviously pending injuries. So that could be attractive to a team of the Red Sox saying, hey, we can give you Tristan Casas, because then I do think they'd be willing to, obviously with a few more names attached, give the Red Sox an ace caliber starter. So the Red Sox overall pitching philosophy is that they know they need to improve in that area. They know that both the starting rotation and the bullpen did not give them what they needed in 2024. So heading into 2025, the biggest thing that they're looking for is who are going to be the guys that are going to give us what we need. What pitchers are going to be the best fit to get the Boston Red Sox over the hump and get them back into conversation of being among the elite teams, because baseball is a lot better when the Boston Red Sox are good. I've heard Yankees fans say it. I've heard Mets fans say it. I've heard Dodgers fans say it. I'm listing off all these other big market teams and talking about the three of them all being in the playoffs in 2024, and the Red Sox were not. And the Red Sox are a big market team, So they need to start acting like one again. And I do feel like this is the offseason in which they have made a collective decision that they are done acting like a small market team and they are ready to go out and spend money on guys so that they can show the fans that they actually truly are invested in making this baseball team better for 2025 and that they want to be a team that contends. So the way that I see it is Soto or no Soto, start looking into trade options and deciding what types of pitchers you might want to trade for. And also start talking to free agent starters, which again, a lot of those conversations have already begun to happen. But keep all options open and don't wait too long, because if Soto's decision gets prolonged, then the Red Sox could start missing out on guys. And they're really in a hole because they absolutely cannot go into the 2025 season without an ace. That is just not an option. No team goes to the playoffs without an ace. You need that true number one guy of, okay, this is our guy. We know we can throw him out there every 5 days and he's going to get the job done and get us a win. So they need to go into the season with that ace caliber starter. They seem ready to understand that plan of, okay, if Soto decides to come here, we can trade for a guy. If Soto decides not to come here, we can spend that money elsewhere on a free agent starter. But either way, the Red Sox do have to have a contingency plan in place in case there are guys who decide they want to go elsewhere too. Like say they get really invested in Max Fried and they want to sign him, and then Max Fried decides to go to the Orioles, for example. Then the Red Sox need to know, okay, we missed out on Fried, so who's our next guy? And while they await Juan Soto, because I don't think there's much they can do about that situation anymore, while they await him, then they can focus a lot on what their pitching options are. So we'll see what happens there. But if Soto lands with the Boston Red Sox, expect to see some sort of trade happen for a starting pitcher that the Red Sox could have under team control for years to come. Coming up, I've seen a lot of people blame Craig Breslow for things that are on John Henry and vice versa. So I'm going to be going over the actual difference between the two and who should get blamed for what and who should get credit for what. Don't forget to check out other shows on the Locked On Podcast Network. Like if you are a big Boston sports fan like myself, not just the Red Sox, you can check out Locked On Patriots, Locked On Celtics, Locked On Bruins. Those shows are all great to tune into right now because they're all in season. Bruins have been playing a little bit better since they fired head coach Jim Montgomery. The Celtics are looking like the defending champs, and now Porzingis is healthy, so they have the squad back together. And the Patriots are in a rebuilding season, but they have a quarterback in Drake May who's looking very promising. So if you're a fan of any of those teams, definitely tune into those respective shows as well, because we have very talented hosts across the whole network. If you're a college sports fan, you can tune into the college shows as well. So lots of options, and all of our Locked On shows are here for you every day to provide you with the most up-to-date information about your team. So be sure to check those shows out. Craig Breslow versus John Henry. Too many people, to me, get them confused, not physically which one's which, but more who does what and who makes what kinds of decisions during the offseason in terms of what players they're going to bring to Boston. So let me just make this clear. I in no way am going to defend John Henry until he gives us a reason to defend him, until he shows us that he's willing to spend real money and go out and get guys. I am not going to defend him until that happens. But what I will say is this. John Henry deals with the money. John Henry is the one who ultimately goes and makes the decision on, okay, we're going to sign this guy or we're not. And the biggest thing to me about that is he willing to go out and open the checkbook and maximize what he's giving guys? Because, for example, with this Juan Soto situation, it's ultimately up to him how much money gets spent on Soto. It's up to him if he comes to Boston, what kind of contract he gets, because he's the one dishing out the money. However, Craig Breslow is the one who goes and says, we need to get Juan Soto. He is going to make the Boston Red Sox a better baseball team, so we need to negotiate with his camp. And the negotiation process is more on Craig Breslow to tell Soto and his team what makes Boston such an attractive place to play, why he should pick the Red Sox over other teams that he was considering, and be the bulk of that aspect of it by saying, okay, Juan, here's the deal. If you come to Boston, you can have a lot of sustained long-term success and postseason appearances because we have the best farm system in baseball right now with the number one prospect in the sport in our organization. So that is on Breslow to talk to him and say, okay, you are somebody who we really want to have here, and we will do whatever it takes to bring you here. So the conversations and the types of players that they get, that is on Breslow. So all of those trade deadline moves that he made, the ones that we criticized by saying they didn't pan out, those were on Breslow. But when it comes to the actual writing of the check, that's on Henry. So Henry overrules Breslow. So Henry can come back and say, I don't want to spend money on that guy. And then Breslow obviously can't negotiate with that player. So when you're trying to figure out who to blame for what and who to give credit for what, make sure that you're understanding that from a money perspective, John Henry is your guy who ultimately is going to write those checks and finalize the agreement by saying, you know, here's that $600 million that we're going to give you over the next 12 years or what have you, writes a check for $50 million for the first year and gives it to him. That all goes through Henry. So because of the fact that the Red Sox philosophy the last few years was that they didn't want to go out and spend a crazy amount of money, that left Chaim Bloom and Craig Breslow in a tough spot of feeling restricted in terms of the type of players that they could get to bring to the Boston Red Sox. And it can be really frustrating and upsetting for somebody who really wants to put the best team on the field, but ultimately he cannot control what John Henry decides about his checkbook. So ultimately, if Breslow's like, you know, I think it's worth signing Corbin Burns, and John Henry says, I'm not paying that money, then that's a no-go and they move on. But if Breslow says, I want to sign Corbin Burns, and Henry goes, okay, I'd be willing to spend the money on him, let's offer him a good contract, it's then up to Breslow to negotiate that and try to get him to come to Boston. And with a trade, same thing. He is the one who initiates trades. He's the one who's having conversations about bringing players to Boston that could be a good fit at the trade deadline. That is all on Breslow to make those calls and try to get these deals finalized. So they do have different roles, and you want to be careful about which one's getting credit when a good move is made and which one's getting the hate when there's a move that's made that isn't as good. It really just depends on so many variables. And we as fans will never know fully what the conversations are behind closed doors. We will never fully know how much of it is John Henry restricting Craig Breslow and how much of it is him having trouble identifying the right level of talent that needs to come to Boston in order for them to be a true contender once again. That is a lot of times where people do get confused is John Henry calling the shots on even what players they talk to? Is he saying to Breslow, yes or no, like you can or can't have a conversation with this guy? Or is Breslow able to make those decisions on his own of saying, okay, it's worth talking to Juan Soto. He is one of the best players in the sport and the most desirable free agent on the market right now. Why would we pass up the opportunity to at least talk to him and see what the Red Sox can offer and see if we are a good fit? That is something that Breslow does. But how much of that is on Henry giving him permission to do it or not and saying, no matter what, I'm not spending the money on him, so it's not worth having a conversation. That's the part that we don't know when it's behind closed doors, so it's always hard to really peg it on one of them versus the other. But when it comes to trade negotiations, those are absolutely on Breslow. He needs to be able to recognize the talent and be able to make sure he's not getting gypped out of a return from another team if they do execute a trade. And from a business standpoint, that's why they brought Breslow in to do the job that he's doing so that he can make those kinds of business deals. But John Henry physically writes out the checks, so he has the power to say yes or no, I do or don't want to spend money on this type of player. So that's the difference between Craig Breslow and John Henry. I hope that they're on the same page about a lot of the moves they want to make this offseason, which it seems like they are based on how they've been talking about it, how they feel like, okay, we can't mess around. We need to make moves that are going to please our fans and are going to put the Red Sox back in a conversation of prominence and being one of the most competitive teams in the sport. So we will see what happens with the rest of this offseason. I'm hoping that they don't back down from challenges and that they don't shy away from big name players because they feel that they're too much money. So definitely looking forward to seeing who else does decide to come to Boston this offseason. But I do appreciate you making Locked On Red Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB on Spotify, Apple Play, Google, whatever you listen to your podcast on. You can find Locked On MLB, YouTube also. Baseball guru Sully, aka Paul Sullivan, brings a daily blend of humor in baseball and gives you everything you need to know surrounding the league. So if you want to know what's going on with other teams, his show is 100% the place for you. Like I always say, though, as always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.